My name's Shawn. I drive the Murder Nova. They call it the Murder Nova because I murdered everything out on it.
For 30 years, he was a legend on the streets, untouchable, fearless, unstoppable. No one knew the life he lived when the engines stopped roaring and the cameras went dark. Until now, the truth behind Murder Nova's double life threatens to shatter everything the Street Outlaws thought they knew. Aftermath and legacy. The revelation of Murder Nova's double life sent shockwaves that reverberated far beyond the streets he once dominated. For decades, fans had celebrated a legend defined by speed, skill, and daring. Now that same legend was complicated by secrecy, deception, and a life carefully hidden from view. The aftermath was immediate, intense, and impossible to ignore. Street Outlaws insiders scrambled to process the new reality. Crew members who had spent years alongside Nova felt a mixture of betrayal and awe. They had believed in him completely, shared victories, planned strategies, and forged camaraderie that they assumed was grounded in honesty. But decades of hidden relationships, clandestine financial dealings, and secret alliances reshaped those connections, leaving questions that had no easy answers. Rival racers reacted with a mixture of vindication and uncertainty. Some celebrated the exposure, claiming that Nova had held too much power for too long, while others feared the ripple effects. If someone as disciplined and controlled as Nova could live a double life undetected for 30 years, what did that say about the world of street racing itself? How many others had hidden truths lurking just beneath the surface? Fans were perhaps the most visibly affected. Social media forums exploded with discussion, debate, and speculation. Some expressed outrage, feeling betrayed by a man they had idolized for decades. Others defended him, framing his secrecy as a survival tactic in a dangerous world. Across platforms, the consensus was clear. The myth of Murder Nova had been irrevocably altered. Legal and financial consequences also came into play. Investigators delved into the hidden aspects of his life, reviewing shell companies, property records, and financial transactions conducted under aliases. While Nova had been careful to avoid direct legal exposure, the uncovering of his dual existence prompted scrutiny that threatened to unravel years of planning. Attorneys and accountants worked tirelessly to piece together documentation and explain anomalies. The personal fallout was equally intense. Individuals who had been part of Nova's hidden life, his friends, associates, and romantic partners, all found themselves thrust into the spotlight. Their stories added texture to the revelation, exposing the human dimension of a life that had long been obscured by public performance. Psychologists and commentators weighed in, analyzing the man behind the myth. Some emphasized the brilliance required to maintain dual identities for decades, while others focused on the ethical implications of his deception, questioning the morality of a man whose secrecy touched so many lives. The fascination was universal. Murder Nova was a study in contrasts, a figure simultaneously heroic and deeply flawed. Even with the exposure, Nova's legend was not entirely diminished. If anything, it evolved as his skill on the track remained undeniable, his charisma still magnetic, and his influence in street racing history secure. However, now the narrative was more nuanced. No longer could fans and insiders simply celebrate victories and daring feats. They had to acknowledge the complexity, the hidden life, and the strategic mastery that had allowed him to live 30 years in parallel worlds. The impact on Street Outlaws as a community was profound. Rules, assumptions, and loyalties were re-examined. New policies around transparency, oversight, and accountability began to emerge in response to the revelation. The exposure of Nova's double life acted as a catalyst for change, forcing the racing world to confront uncomfortable truths about secrecy, myth-making, and the human tendency to idolize figures without questioning the whole story. For Nova, the consequences were deeply personal. While his public persona remained intact to some degree, relationships, both public and private, were irrevocably altered. Trust had been compromised. Admiration had been complicated by skepticism, and friendships had been tested by the revelation of hidden truths. Yet there was also a recognition of his genius. Few could have maintained dual existences at such a scale and with such precision. Even those who felt betrayed could not deny the audacity, discipline, and intelligence required to execute such a life. In the months following the exposure, the story continued to evolve. Investigative journalists released detailed timelines. Fans compiled archives of sightings and financial records, and online discussions dissected every aspect of Nova's life. What had once been speculation was now documented, debated, and analyzed. Yet the man himself remained an enigma, a figure whose silence, discipline, and careful planning preserved some mystery even in the face of total revelation. Ultimately, the legacy of Murder Nova is defined by duality. He is remembered not just for his victories, his charisma, or his skill, but for the extraordinary ability to live a life invisible in plain sight. 30 years of secrecy, deception, and careful orchestration have become as much a part of his legend as the races themselves. The myth has not been destroyed. It has been redefined, expanded to include both brilliance and duplicity. The lessons are clear. In a world that idolizes heroes, even those who seem untouchable can harbor secrets. In a culture that celebrates skill and daring, the ability to control perception is as powerful as any victory on the track. And in a community built on loyalty, trust, and shared experience, even the smallest cracks can have monumental consequences when a life is lived in parallel. Fans, rivals, and historians alike will continue to debate, analyze, and speculate. The streets may never forget the legend of Murder Nova, but they will also remember the revelation, the moment when myth collided with reality, when the double life that had been hidden for decades became impossible to ignore. His story is a cautionary tale, a thrilling narrative, and a testament to the complexity of human ambition. In the end, the streets themselves bear witness. Engines continue to roar, racers continue to compete, and fans continue to cheer. But the memory of Nova's dual existence lingers like a shadow over every race, every victory, every celebration. 30 years of secrecy have left an indelible mark, not just on the Street Outlaws, but on the culture itself. Murder Nova may have lived a double life, but the revelation ensures that his story will endure in full, complex, shocking, and unforgettable. The legend, now layered with truth, remains alive as an enduring testament to the audacity, intelligence, and meticulous control required to live as both myth and man for 3 decades. And while the streets have moved on, the lesson resonates. Some lives are faster, darker, and more intricate than anyone could imagine. And some secrets, no matter how well concealed, have a way of coming to light, exposed at last. The revelation came suddenly, like the drop of a guillotine. 30 years of deception, careful planning, and meticulous secrecy began unraveling with a single investigative report. And Murder Nova's hidden life was laid bare for the world to see. Investigators traced a series of shell companies, fake identities, and property transfers that, when connected, formed an entirely different narrative from the one fans had believed. Nova's racing victories and public persona now existed alongside a parallel life filled with clandestine relationships, secret alliances, and financial maneuvers that no one could have imagined. The first reaction was disbelief. Street Outlaws fans who had followed Nova's every move for years struggled to reconcile the image of the fearless, larger-than-L life driver with the man whose life had been meticulously compartmentalized. Forums and fan pages exploded with discussion, debates, and outrage. The legend of Murder Nova had been shattered, leaving fans grasping for answers. Rivals reacted with a mixture of awe and vindication. Many had suspected something was off, but no one had concrete evidence. Now the proof was undeniable. For years they had competed against a man whose influence extended far beyond the track, allowing him to stay one step ahead. Friends and crew members were devastated. Those who had worked alongside Nova for decades found themselves questioning every interaction. Loyalty had been rewarded with performance and charisma, but secrecy had governed the entirety of their relationship. Betrayal, whether intentional or incidental, hung in the air. Media outlets seized upon the story. Headlines screamed of the double life of Murder Nova, of secrets in the Street Outlaws, and of the man behind the legend. Every detail uncovered, financial, personal, and professional, was dissected and debated. The story transcended racing communities and became a national sensation, gripping audiences fascinated by the audacity and meticulousness of Nova's decades-old-long deception. Fans felt betrayed, Some expressed anger, others confusion. How could a man they admired so intensely be living a life entirely hidden from view? Meanwhile, rival racers and insiders attempted to navigate the new landscape, uncertain whether to capitalize on the revelation or distance themselves from the man who had dominated the sport for so long. Nova himself remained remarkably composed, though only a few could truly know the truth behind his calm exterior. He had anticipated exposure, at least in part. The unveiling forced the community to confront uncomfortable truths. For years, Nova's skill, charisma, and daring had been celebrated without question, but the revelation demanded a reassessment. What had been genuine and what had been performance? Fans, journalists, and insiders alike grappled with the tension between admiration and skepticism. The line between myth and reality blurred, leaving a legacy that was both heroic and deeply troubling. Even as the initial shock wave subsided, the consequences continued to unfold. Sponsors reevaluated their relationships with associates, event organizers, scrutinized prior dealings, and law enforcement continued to investigate potential legal implications. Some attempted to defend him. Analysts argued that his secrecy had been a form of self-preservation, that the complexity of his dual life had been necessary to navigate the dangerous world of street racing. Others took a harsher view, emphasizing the deception and the betrayal of trust toward friends, fans, and rivals alike. Opinions were polarized, but the consensus was clear. The myth of Murder Nova had been irrevocably altered. The most dramatic revelations came from the personal relationships he had maintained in secret. Those closest to him in his hidden life emerged publicly, sharing stories that painted a portrait of a man who was meticulous, cunning, and capable of compartmentalizing emotions with surgical precision. For the Street Outlaws community, the impact was profound. Nova had been a central figure, a benchmark, and a source of inspiration. His absence from public life would now be felt more acutely than ever. The community had to adjust to a reality in which one of its most iconic figures was not only fallible, but had lived a life entirely outside the understanding of his peers. The broader public reaction was equally intense. Behind the speed, the victories, and the myth, there was a life hidden in plain sight for 30 years. If this revelation shocked you, share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more untold stories and stay with us because the next truth